Hello, everybody. Another episode of the Mind Body Marathon. And on today's show, we're going to talk about my recent experience at the Valencia Marathon. And on the show, I have my wife, beautiful wife, Samua Kormanik, with me. And we're going to chat a little bit about my experience in Spain. So,
Let's start off with how sad I was that I could not go on this trip.
yeah, it
It
started
was
out, it was supposed to be a guy's trip. I was supposed to go with your brother and a couple Brazilians, Brazilian runners, and it was going to
and
be
they were
hit.
going from Brazil, right?
Yeah.
They don't live in Europe.
Yeah, so there was your brother who's in Europe, and then, he was gonna run his first marathon, and then a couple of his friends from Brazil, which that turned into they brought, like, 40 people from this, like, running group, and
Brazilians always roll deep.
yeah, I know, they
We
get
take the
after it.
party wherever we go.
That's definitely the fact, and they brought about 40, and it was this, like, little running group, I forget the name of their group, but it was a cool little name, and so it kinda turned into your brother brought his wife, and then
The friend brought
the
his
friend brought his
wife.
wife.
And then I still couldn't go because it was Naomi's 18th birthday
Yeah.
on the day of the race. There was no way I
Yeah, so
could
that
miss that.
it turned into I was the 5th wheel.
Except that you did have a date for a little bit in Valencia.
Yeah, so I met, Matt Hebeling, and he was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, so that was fun, but
My brother texted me. He's like, "Oh, that was so nice of you to let Leo bring a date after all, since you couldn't be here."
yeah, that was the joke, was that my wife couldn't be there, so Matt was my replacement, but yeah, no, it so we had a great time, turned out good. Your brother did not finish the marathon, he dropped a 25K.
How many times do I get to make fun of him for that during the podcast?
He'll love to hear that. He's probably our solo listen from Luxembourg.
So the interesting thing about the marathon after you came home and you had stories about it was I had never heard of the Valencia Marathon. I would say it'd be like saying like the Canton Marathon or something. Like it's just a marathon that exists locally and, however many people show up. But it turns out it's actually a kind of a big deal
Yeah.
of a race, which I had no idea.
They're a little sub-salty that, they are not a major. It's
Oh,
funny.
really?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get the feel that, like, they're they just the organization and the expo, and they definitely run it like a major. It had 28,000 finishers, just over 28,000.
Which is solid.
Which is really solid, actually,
Yeah.
because they had the floods there about, 6 weeks
Right.
prior,
I know,
and
because like a few days out, we were still
they were
wondering if you were
teasing
gonna
with
go or not.
yeah, they were teasing with canceling the race, up to 2 weeks before, about 10 days before, and, it's still incredible that 28,000 people, descended upon the city and ran the race. Well, they often compare themselves to majors because it is statistically the fastest marathon in the world, in terms of like average finishing time and percent of people that break 3 and 3:30. Um, and they consistently kind of throw that out there. But the way the majors sort of works is they want to get on each continent. So as of right now, there's 6 official majors: London, Berlin, Tokyo, uh, Chicago, New York, Boston,
And
and
Sydney now, right?
well, Sydney is going to be the 7th for next year, and then in the makings is potentially Shanghai, and then also, Cape Town, which then
Ooh.
leaves South America wide open, but I think they don't wanna add any more European races, because there's already 2 and there's 3 in the States,
So
and
add a third one, make it like the States.
logically, Valencia would be that one. Also, there's some other bigger ones like Rotterdam and some other European races that could contend for that as well. Paris maybe even could be up there. But Valencia is a absolute world class event, and all you have to do is just look at the top finishers, and it tends to be the top finishers meaning like the overall leaders. It tends to be kind of a debut race for a lot of high end Europeans and Africans.
Are
Um,
they drawn to it because it's fast? So they
it's
kinda get to a little boost with their debut?
Well, that, but also, like, it's easier to get to, and it's not as hard to get into as, like, Berlin or London, and so if you're just a, newbie marathoner coming from Kenya, it's cheaper to get to. It's right across the Mediterranean, and it's known to be fast. Kelvin Kiptum debuted there, like, 2 or 3 years ago, I think, in 2:01:50, and then Sebastian Sawe, won this year in 2:02:05. So
Wow.
he's like 50. He was 15 seconds off of Kelvin Kiptum's debut, and Sebastian debuted as well. So it stands to reason that we kind of have our next major marathoner out in the world right now. So he debuted at 2:02 on that course. It's a real course. I caught the leaders at about 8K for me, and much farther for them, maybe 15K for them. And it was cool to see Bakile and some of the big names up front and whatnot. And it's an elite group. So they
Well, how
definitely.
many runners ran sub 3? You said it's a
So
crazy number.
it's like 5,300.
That's out of 28,000. That's
It's
almost
so
a
it's about
quarter.
it's just under 20%. So
Yeah.
in 2023, so last year they had about 20% break three. This year was about 18.5% of the runners broke three.
Now, compared to other marathons, what is the average percentage?
That's a great question. So you're looking at like Boston. So New York would struggle to get 1,000 people to break three. Um,
And New York has over 40,000. Right?
So Berlin had about 6,400, but then they doubled the size of the field. So then you're looking at Berlin had about 1,200 more people break three, but double the field. So if
Okay.
you do the math on that, it's only about 8% for Berlin breaks three, whereas Valencia was like 18.5.
Wow.
So it's pretty substantial. And I want to say over half the field ran faster than 3:30.
But would that maybe be what holds them against the majors? Like they're too fast. Like not that it's an easy course. It's never easy to run a marathon.
Yeah, but there's no restrictions to get in. That's what's weird about it. It's like it's like, a lot of these major marathons, they have like
Cutoffs and all
times,
that.
yeah. And so they also have like guaranteed entries for certain times and stuff, and Valencia was not that way. So people just literally want to go there to run fast. And the course is funny. It's not even like a downhill course, or it's not even net downhill. It's not even like point to point, so you get a tailwind. It's not like there's nothing about the course that's fast. It's just a major city, and you just do a tour of the city. I mean, it's like pretty circuitous. You look at the route, and it's like there's a decent amount of turns. We're here in Cleveland, Akron area, and everybody wants to complain about the Cleveland Marathon, which has a bunch of turns. And I was like, well, look at the map of Valencia. It's actually not much better. And then some dude debuted in 2:02 on it. Like, it's quite phenomenal.
Do you think it's a sangria?
Sangria and paella.
There's a little magic in that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, paella, it is a lot of carbs. So
I know.
good carb loading.
So that's the other thing too. The city is
Lots
just
of antioxidants and then carb loading. Maybe that's a secret sauce.
yeah, because there's all that seafood in it. Yeah, Valencia. So it's basically close to Barcelona. So it's coastal Spain, and it doesn't feel at all like Barcelona. Barcelona is a very international city. It's got it's a cool city. It's a very cool city. Everybody should go there if you haven't been. But Valencia is like real Spain. Like paella and sangria is like indigenous to that area. And it's just the vibes of the city. It's a very active population. They have a beautiful park system in the middle of the city. The start and finish was absolutely phenomenal. Not a lot of American representation there, and I don't know if that was because this year it was the week of Thanksgiving, so it was the Sunday of the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you weren't home for that.
Yeah, so
Which
I
was
had
sad and different for us.
I know. It's my favorite holiday, and I had to be overseas. But I did get sangria and paella on Thanksgiving instead of turkey, so I would take that any day of the week. Although not your famous pies, famous bourbon chocolate pecan pies.
Yeah, you didn't get I'll make it for you for Christmas. But there was an American that was there that made sure she made a name for herself at Valencia.
So she got top 10. So Sarah Hall, she's my age. She's 42. Or she was at least born in 82. So I don't know if I think she is 42. And she set the master's record at 2:26, I want to say she ran.
I don't know, but I did see.
She was top 10 overall, which was pretty phenomenal because that is a star-studded field.
Yeah, I did see her comment because I guess she's been rattling different injuries because poor Sarah doesn't have access to you. And for a couple of years. And so she said it's her fastest marathon in like 2 or 3 years.
Dude, you just go to Valencia to run fast. Anybody listening to this, like if you're looking to run fast, go to Spain and do this race.
And get some awesome sangria and paella.
Yeah, don't mess around. It's like, and I was talking with a lot of the Brazilians after the race, and I'm like, I don't know why it's so fast. Like, and people had the audacity to tell me like, oh, I think the course is short. I had numerous people say that to me. And I'm like, what a confusing statement. They offer $1 million if you break the world record there. That's not a short course.
$1 million?
$1 million. They offered that. Yeah. They don't mess around at that race. And like, I mean, these are big names, like, the biggest names in the sport run this race, so, like, what do you mean it's short? That's such a weird thing to say.
I mean, if they're offering $1,000,000
It's
for world
obviously
records, obviously
certified.
500 different people are certifying that
Yes.
that distance, making
It's
sure
such an
it's
odd
accurate.
statement, but it's just so foreign to a lot of people, and I think that's, probably why. I
Now,
mean,
have some of the
there's a
bigger
lot of
names.
fast people in this world. I mean, that's you go to the race like this, and on the bib, it had, like, every, nation's flag, so, like, you can like, it just sort of whatever nation you were from, it represented,
Oh, that's really cool. I
and so
didn't
you
notice that on your bib.
yeah, so it's like a little circle, and you could easily see, like, even during the race, you could see, like, where people are from, and, like, I literally saw now I know Sarah Hall ran it, but I literally saw one other American flag the whole time of all the thousands of people I saw, um, and
What
it's
was the flag you saw the most?
probably Spain and
Okay,
France,
outside of Spain and France, what
and
was
then
the 3rd?
England was probably the 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. But, dude, there was a ton of Brazilians there, though.
Well, they all went with you.
That was the other big thing. There was a lot of, decent amount of Germans, tons of French, Spanish, and British.
Now, have some of the other big names ran Valencia? Like, do you
Yeah,
know, like
yeah.
Kipchoge,
Gebre
like
Selassie has run it in the past. I don't know if Kipchoge's done it, but like I said, Kelvin Kiptum debuted there. A lot of big names for the females as well. Yeah, it's a big race.
now one of the things that you said, you were kind of bummed actually that you didn't have more time for this, but you mentioned their expo was like
Yeah, the
super
expo is
sweet
cool.
and there was a lot of brands that you didn't know about, which is shocking because you usually know all the up and coming stuff. So
Yeah,
it's impressive that,
there's a lot
however
of
they pulled in these unique things.
well, New Balance was the major sponsor, and they had a great, beautiful booth. Um, and then there was a bunch of like, pretty cool European brands and very indigenous Spanish brands. So a lot of things you wouldn't normally see, and then a bunch of race offerings that you wouldn't normally get access to too. So that was pretty cool. But the expo was shockingly huge. The unfortunate situation about anybody that went this year was that the floods had destroyed the metros and the subways in the city, and it's the third biggest region of Spain in terms of population. So there is a decent subway system. So the roads were absolutely packed with traffic, and the expo was legitimately on the exact opposite side of town from the race itself, the
So just
start
hard
and
to get
finish.
to.
It was very nightmarish to get to and very stressful for a lot of people. So I think the expo experience was a little rushed for a lot of people.
That's a bummer. So you have to go back just so you can do the expo again then.
Yeah, I mean, I will gladly go back to that race. It was by far the best marathon I've done 20 marathons or so, right around there. I can't remember the exact
Wow,
number.
that number went up quick.
Yeah,
I mean, I
and
know we were doing them almost once a month for a while there, but
yeah,
20 already.
by
Wow.
far the best one I've ever been to. So, great. And I would say the interesting thing too about the crowd support, it was decent crowd support, not overwhelming like a Chicago or a New York. It kind of felt more like a Boston crowd support where there are spots where it's kind of quiet, but there are spots where it's pretty raging. Like around Heartbreak Hill, and the finish of Boston is obviously pretty epic. And Valencia definitely had some spots that were pretty cool. But there was definitely some quiet spots on the course as well, which was good because you can get into a nice rhythm. But the thing that was cool was the finish was they gave 100-meter marks for the last K of the finish, and that was pretty cool to see. And so basically, the whole last K was just roaring, just people on both sides, just pretty epic sound. And the course was very narrow at that point, and it felt really raucous. It was pretty cool.
Nice. Now you mentioned a little bit of a Tour de France
Oh yeah, so
style.
that
What
was
do
the
you
other.
mean? What did you mean by that?
So anybody that's watched the Tour de France, you've seen maybe potentially like numerous wrecks that have happened because the crowd sort of descends on the race. And, there's no, like a lot of times in US races for the majors, there's barriers, like, on the road to, like, kinda keep the fans from, crowding the course essentially. Well, there, they didn't do that. They did in a couple spots, but for the most part, there was
It's
no
just a free
barriers.
for all. There's
So
no
it kinda
like,
was. So, like, you get to the narrow parts of the old part of the city, so definitely this was the case in the second half of the course in the older part of the city, and, I mean, it's an old city, right? So, like, it was, like,
yeah, like when
founded
we
in
ran Luxembourg, it was like that. A lot of little nooks and crannies because it's an
Yeah,
old city and
and then
cobblestone roads
they
and
didn't have
some would
cobblestone
stop.
roads, but yeah, it's sort of that same feel though, where the course got very narrow and, like, people were, like, right in your face, and that was actually pretty awesome. because the people that are doing that are intense, they're not just like your grandma just standing on the side clapping, like, they were like, you
Go,
know
go, go,
yeah,
and
like
pumping you up.
bullhorns and, like, all sorts of crazy sounds and
Nobody
stuff.
got overwhelming though, like touching or
I didn't have that experience, but yeah, I definitely had a Tour de France feel, and I would imagine for the leaders, it would almost be probably a little scary because, like I said, it maybe at times, like, even gets as wide as this table. It narrows up pretty good, and yeah,
now
it
what
was a nice boost though. It was pretty cool, and I was like, I just love the European style of that. It was so fun.
now what about like course entertainment? Is that like a thing?
Not as much there, no.
No. So it was like the Nashville one where there wasn't even a boombox out for
Not
us.
much. No. Yeah, that's funny. That was the women's
I know
half you did?
the women's like US women's half in Nashville and they couldn't even pull like one high school wannabe. I mean, like you're in
Yeah.
Nashville, there's like a good every street corner there's like a
Yeah.
guitar player, singer-songwriter person. Like you can't even get like a high school student that wanted to like just showcase their talent. Come on. Like literally not even one. That was sad.
Well, they didn't yeah, so they didn't have a bunch of spots like that where people had, like, boom boxes and you had a DJ out, but the crowd at certain points got really loud and ruckus, but there was no bands, there was no, like, DJ, and so that was one thing that
At
was that
all?
no,
None?
not really.
Because even Chicago, like I ran Chicago, which is one of the majors, and they had a few spots where I remember there was one spot they had a big TV screen set up and you could kind of see yourself because it was the video camera was somewhere projecting. Um, definitely by far, I shouldn't say by far, Disney does a really good job with that, but very impressively, Columbus Marathon
Yeah,
is like really good with that. I mean, we were like looking at their list and we're like, there's DJs not even half a mile
I
apart.
know. Yeah, and there may
That's what I love
there may
about
have
the race.
been more of that had I paid attention, but
You just run too
honestly,
fast.
there was this one I remember, and I talked about this with your brother. There was, like, one section that was, like, all a bunch of cows. Not, like, literally cows, but they were, like, a bunch of, like, cow sounds and this big old cow banner. It was, like, such a weird thing. Like, it was, like, advertising for some milk brand, and you could hear it because that was the course kinda went out and back a little bit. It had a little dog leg, and then you can definitely hear the cows for, like, a couple Ks. It was so
The
weird.
cowbells?
We just all kinda knew it was coming, and
It's
I
like
think that was,
that,
like, K19.
it's like the Saturday Night Live skit, "More
I
cowbell,
know,
we need
right?
more cowbell." They listened to that. They must have watched it the week before. Popped up on their YouTube.
Yeah, so I would say that maybe was something they can flex a little bit more was kind of the course entertainment. But then again, I don't know, like, that's just the feel of the race. It was just, like, flat, fast, just get after it and not as entertainy sort of feel.
So, you've been battling some injuries for a bit. We were doing I don't know why I say we, because all I did was just travel with you, but um, every like 6 weeks or so, you were hitting all the different marathons a couple years ago, the sub 3 with, 20 miles of training, and then your Achilles kind of
Yeah,
became a petulant child for you and wouldn't get better. So this is your first one that you've completed in how long?
a year and a half. Yeah, a
Wow.
little over. So it was May of 23, I did Cleveland. That was the last marathon I finished. And I dropped out of, like, 2 other marathons, but I signed up for 5 since then, and I
Just
didn't
kept canceling.
yeah, just kept canceling, yeah. It wasn't great, Achilles was definitely a bummer, and, I did the rim to rim to rim in October, so that was nice to be able to do that. I got all my injections in PRP in August or July, and I really didn't start training till August, so I got fit pretty quick for this,
Yeah.
um, and, yeah, I was happy to be able to finish a marathon for sure.
So how was that for you coming back and, like having to have like mentally the mindset of I don't know, like do you even worry about am I going to finish this compared to the other couple
Yeah,
that you
no,
dropped
I
out
was.
of and
And that's so I went through the half in Valencia at 122 high, so basically 123. So basically I'm paced for 246. And I felt really good physically, but I can start to feel my Achilles a little bit coming on my left side. And I got it to about 20, just past 25K. And that's the thing about Valencia is that they're obviously European, so they earn Ks. And they only had the 10-mile mark and the 20-mile mark were the only actual mile marks I saw. But for the most part, everything was on a K, which I actually kind of preferred, to be honest with you. But got to about 25K. And I was like, "Yeah, I really need to kinda reel this in and just look to finish the race and kinda quit pushing." And so I'd slowed it down at that point and looked to just be able to get the, avoid the DNF. So,
Well, you did significantly better than that because you
yeah,
did
well
2:51. So, I mean, I know there's been some races that you finished pretty close to the sub 3, but this one, I mean, you had a 9-minute almost a 9-minute.
yeah, and I clearly if you look at the photos of me and what the way I felt, my cardiovascular was strong and I could have run faster, but I physically was very weak. Like, I could feel, my form was breaking down, like, I just wasn't very strong, like, I gotta do a more concerted effort, and that was the theme of the rim to rim to rim, like, I just was weak, like, I just need to get stronger in my quads and glutes and hip flexors and just, like, really kinda ramp all that up.
We just gotta go Samba more.
That would help if I first I have to learn how to samba.
You always talk about my quads when we go dancing that they can keep going forever, so
Yeah, she
we just gotta
can.
go dancing more.
Yeah.
I'll help you out with that. That training I can help you with.
I mean, it'll help with the coordination too. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a big theme, and, I got to I got to the closer to the end, about 5, 10K left, and I could really feel my form breaking down, and my legs kinda started to go numb a little bit, and I think that was just because I have, like, some back issues, and I had traveled a bunch. I had done 3 red eyes in 3.5 weeks, and
Yeah, because we
so
flew to and from Brazil and
and
then
then
obviously
and then
there.
to Spain as well. So that was just taking a toll on my body, and I just wasn't sharp, and so that's why I was just kinda like, "All right, well, enjoy the race, just kinda pack it in and just try to give a decent effort." I kinda loosely wanted to be under 2:53 because that's always, like, one of the time qualifiers for New York. Not that that matters anymore, because like, New York's still impossible to get into, but it's always nice to just have that as a mark.
Wait, if the qualifying time is 2:53, why is it still
It's just they have
impossible?
this whole 9+1 thing. There's this whole there's a lot of drama with getting into New York. It really is a genuine lottery in terms of, like, what they select, but they your numbers do bump up if you do more New York Roadrunner races, and
I've
it's
heard
not a
of that,
guarantee.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee if you actually run a time that they tell you to run.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so but
I know that one time, when I woke up, because you were 6 hours ahead, so of course that always made it difficult to try to us to even connect on the phone, but then to follow up the race. And I remember waking up, I think it was like in the middle of the night or close to the middle of the night just to use the bathroom, and I popped in my phone to see where you were at, and the timing chip said something like 3:30, I think,
yeah.
was your, like, ETA to finish, and I was just like, "Holy crap, like, what is happening?" And then my next thought was, because I knew my brother was on the fence about running
Yeah,
and with if he wasn't even gonna start it, and I didn't know, like, where that all got left off. I'm like, "Oh, I bet you he's just running with my brother to, like, help him out and get him to do it and this and that." And so that's kinda was my thought. But turns out it wasn't either of those things
no.
because their timing clock it didn't have you finish at 3:30, but it did still have a significantly over
Yeah.
wrong time for you.
Yeah, it didn't catch at the start, I guess, and it stated that I started at 8:15 when I actually started at 8:25, so it had me for about that whole day at 3:01 as a finishing time rather than 2:51 because it was the 10 minutes off.
Which then when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, man, he must be so pissed because he
Yeah,
just missed it."
I know. It's always nice to be under 3, it's such an honor. Um, you know, it's just a solid effort, to just have that, so that's why I always kinda use that as a barometer. And that's why it's a good barometer to kinda test the quality of the race. I mean, like, 5,300 or so people broke it. It was unbelievable. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, like, one of the other things too that I really enjoyed about it, like I said, I liked the K marks, um, and so what I ended up doing was I kept missing the Ks because they actually obviously happen more frequently than miles, 'cause a marathon is
I feel
42K.
like that would screw with my head so much because, like, I'm like, the whole time that I'm running, I'm always running, counting down, like, how much more do I have to
Yeah.
keep out here running? And because as we've talked about before, I hate running, so I'm always just counting down, like and having it I think that that would just mess me
Well,
up
that's why I
so
started to
much.
do a 5K splits. I stopped doing every K at about I mean, I actually think at the 5K mark, I'm like, "Screw it, I'm just doing 5K splits." So then I kinda wanted to keep my 5K splits sitting around 4 minutes per K, which is 20 minutes for a 5K. And so that made it easy, just 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. And so it also helped too, because by the time I got to like 25, 30K, that sounded easier to finish, like having 10K left or 15K left.
Yeah.
That feels like an easier number versus miles for some reason. I don't know. It just was a easier pill to swallow later in the race.
Well, definitely I would say, like, when I'm running and I always screw up my math as good as I am at math, for some reason, every half marathon, when I get to, like, I think it's when I'm down to
Mm.
the 8-mile marker, I always think, like, I have less to go than I
Yeah.
do, and that screws me over.
Like you have like 5 miles left instead of 6 miles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that always makes me mad because then, like, the next mile or 2, I'll realize, like, "Crap, no, I still have this amount of miles to go."
Yeah.
It's almost like I guess psychologically, I think like, "Oh, I just ran an extra mile," but I didn't. I obviously ran the same amount of miles, but mathematically, it's how I screwed myself over. But I do the 5K thing at the end, and then I'm always like, "Okay, I have a 5K left. I can do this. I can do a 5K."
Right.
And
Yeah, that
so
helps.
but that's the only time that I go into Ks.
Yeah, and then the other thing too that was interesting was like obviously being an American, we're off the imperial system of the Fahrenheit as well, and numerous times throughout the course, and that's the other thing too. It actually was pretty spicy. Like I remember at about 25-ish K or 30K, I saw a sign that said it was 15 degrees Celsius out, which is about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So it actually was a little warm. And then 5K later, it was already up to 20 Celsius,
Oh,
which
wow.
is 68 Fahrenheit. So it actually it's not that it was chilly out either.
It got
It was
warm,
a little
yeah.
warm, and
Was it even that
people
warm
still
the
ran fast. Like that's the thing. Like I think it's so awesome that people got after it and they didn't. And I don't know if it was like a lot of Europeans there or a lot of the people, a lot of Africans or a lot of people there that are used to the heat, but like most Americans would not do well under those hotter conditions.
Well, didn't that
Sadly.
happen either Boston or Chicago this year was too warm?
Um,
Wasn't there
I don't remember. Yeah,
one of the
I
races
don't
this
know.
year?
There's always been the conversation about it getting too warm. I think New York last year got a little warm too. Like not this year, but last year. And then yeah, there's always some conversation around that. Actually, yeah, it was Boston to get a little hot at the end. That's right.
Yeah, I remember, like, a lot of people talking about that. A lot of our
You just gotta prepare
patients,
for
yeah.
that. I mean, the other thing too that I think that a lot of people are busting my chops on is, I don't run with a GPS when I run a marathon. Or actually when I run any race, I don't run with a GPS.
You don't run with the GPS when you run just the streets. You
Yeah,
just,
and
like, know our neighborhood, like, you just know the area, and the other impressive thing about you is you'd be like, "Oh, I'm gonna run 6 miles," and then you just kinda in your head map, and it ends up being, like, 6 miles on the
well,
dot.
that's that old school runner, where you just kinda like you just work off time and work off you just get used to that kinda stuff, and it makes the run more fun and creative. But the other thing too about racing without a GPS is like, by the end, so many people are like, "Oh, what is your read?" Like a lot of the Brazilians were like, "Mine was like right around 43K or just 42 point, 8 or 9K." And I when I run the race, nobody runs tangents. And I know like early in the race it's too crowded to run tangents, but I like watch people and I'm like, I'll be literally running tangents and nobody's with me. I'm like solo and there's like a big pack of people like 15 feet to the right of me. I'm like, what are you doing? You're not even running the tangents. Of course you're gonna be long. And then everybody wants to be like, oh, the course is this or that. It's always long. And it's like, it's never long because it drives me bananas, this conversation. Um, yeah, and it's like, even if it was like, say, in theory, Valencia was 3/10 of a K long. What are you gonna, like, put an asterisk by that and say, like like, your race is somehow
You
your
should have
time is,
been
like, 40 seconds faster or something like that? Like, nobody's gonna do that. They're just gonna pull up the result and gonna be verified based on that fact. Like, so since you can't negotiate that, you might as well just wear a watch and just not be hung up on the GPS. Like, I'll, like, watch people in the race, and they're, like, every, like, 15 seconds, they're, like, looking at their watch, and what a weird way to run.
Yeah, I
It
mean, I
takes the
know
joy out of it, and you, like, lose the rhythm. Like, I literally would break it up into 5K splits, so I would not look at my watch for 5K at a time, and I would keep the same
anybody
pace.
watching you must thought you were bananas. They probably were having anxiety that you weren't looking at your watch.
And I feel like that's such a great way to race. There's so much less stress. There's so much connection to how you're feeling and what you're processing, and
Unless you're in the last corral for a Disney race and trying to avoid the balloon ladies and
Then you need to
then
watch
you
it.
need to watch and keep it going.
It's so funny that they do the balloon ladies
Oh
there.
my well, that's an unofficial thing. That it's not like a Disney thing of the balloon ladies. It was just a group of ladies that were
Oh,
kinda
really? That's
always
not actually
yeah, no. Like, they buy their own balloons and bring it,
Do they
and
actually physically sweep you off the course like at Disney?
yeah, they do, yeah.
So the balloon ladies aren't the actual sweepers.
No, so the balloon ladies are just, a group of ladies, and they have grown, and I think they even have a Facebook page now. Um,
That's so cool.
but they're just like regular runners that, have been doing the race since way back, and then when Disney started to get bigger and they started to be more strict with the pulling of people, they just decided to do that because they just have always been like the power walkers at the back. So they're not set up by Disney and they're not the actual sweepers. They're just like they walk it at the pace that is the cutoff.
Yeah.
And so if you're ahead of them, you're not going to get swept. And so it's interesting because they actually kind of try to do it as like a courtesy and to be friendly and nice to the runners, like, hey, like we're here, just be ahead of us. And these poor ladies became like, hated by
Hated.
everybody. If you
Yeah.
go to any Run Disney like Facebook page, like everybody just like dreads the balloon ladies. And they're like, no, like we're just trying to like,
Yeah.
map
People
it for you.
patrons have like legit nightmares of the balloon
Oh my
ladies.
gosh, I know. There's so many
So
conversations
it's like a
about
thing,
them.
like it's like clowns, right? It was supposed to be like
Yeah.
fun at first, and it turns out to be a nightmare.
Exactly. The poor balloon ladies they thought they were going to be cute with their Mickey balloons and letting everybody know, like, hey, just stay ahead of us and you're good. And now they became the topic of conversation of people's nightmares. Poor sweet
Yeah.
ladies. And apparently they are all like, there is a few because Disney has grown so much. I think maybe when they started, it was like 2 races a year. And now there's at one point, I think they had like 10 races, and now they're back down to maybe like 5 or 6. So there is a couple of them that rotate, but I think most of them do
Yeah.
every race. And yeah, these poor and people have said people who end up near them say that they're like super sweet and nice. But in the topic of conversations, especially like newbies to Disney, like in the Disney Facebook
Yeah.
forums, they're all just like the balloon ladies. No, these poor ladies.
Oh,
But
man. Well, the other thing I wanted to touch base upon too is, the conversation of jet lag.
ooh,
And
and
I
running a
think
race.
yeah, and running a race. And one of the tacks that I think is important for performance is that if you're gonna run overseas and so, Spain was 6 hours, ahead, which is funny because they really should be in the British time zone, which is 5 hours ahead, but they're in the German time zone because I guess during World War II, they sided with Germany, and that's kinda why they changed their time zone.
So
And
based on the lines of longitude,
yeah.
latitude, they should be with Britain,
Mhm,
but then
yeah,
they
it's
just
this weird little cutout of Spain, and yeah, it's, like, directly south of Britain, so, like, why
that's
is it
interesting.
and not yeah, but it's in the time zone of France and Germany. But so it's 6 hours, and that's also why the Spanish have, like, such late lunches and late dinners and all that, that's kind of partly the reason why, 'cause they're literally are an hour, ahead, essentially. And so, what I suggest you do is either you arrive to the destination of the race close to the race itself before your body has time to feel bad from the jet lag. So, like, either you try to get there like 2 days or 2.5 days before the race, and then, um, or try to get there like a week or 10 days before the race, which is not feasible for a lot of situations. So that would help either you like let your body fully adapt, which would be more like the week scenario, or you get there before your body like really has a chance to like know
Process what's happening.
process what's going on. Yeah.
So how did that happen for you? Because you're kinda in the
I was
middle
kind of in the
there.
middle. So what I suggest you do is when you get there, you do an effort, like you do like a run that day to like get on that city or that location cycle for the circadian rhythm. And then I suggest you like just straight up use like melatonin or some sleep aids for that night to immediately get on their cycle. And it's easier if you fly west. It's harder if you fly east. So if you're losing time, like it's harder, like versus gaining time. Gaining time, you just kind of naturally feel more tired because it's later anyways. But the other way around, it's really confusing for your body, especially if you take a red eye over, because it's like a six or like basically it's about an 8 or 9 hour flight to get over to that part of Europe from the States. And then there are 6 hours ahead. So it kind of really ends up being sort of a wash for a night, anyways. and then you kind of just want to get on their cycle as soon as possible. So I suggest working out that day, using melatonin that night, and then just trying to just jump right on their system.
Traveling just kinda when you travel like that, because like, even Brazil, it's only an hour ahead. Well, when I got to Brazil, it was an hour ahead. When you got there, it was 2 already, right?
Yeah, because they don't do
Um,
the time change.
yeah, but, like, the whole, like, overnight on an airplane, psychologically, I feel like messes with me because you just kind of feel like you lose like, you don't like, when I'm processing time frames, it took me, like, 2, 3 days to even know what day it was of the
Yeah.
week when I was in Brazil because I kept thinking, like, it should have been, like, half a day earlier than it was because I lost that night on the plane, but I was on the plane, and then I'm in a different country now, and so in my mind, it's like that whole night just didn't happen yet, like, it's still I don't know, it just messes with me psychologically anyways.
The worst situation is, like, if you're flying a red eye back east in the States from, like, Vegas or LA, because the flight is really only, like, 3 to 4 hours, and then you lose the 3 to 4
Yeah, so then you
hours
get here, like,
or
6
the 3
hours
hours.
later.
Yeah, so it's, like, only, like, 6 hours later, but, like, so there's not even enough time for a night of sleep anyways.
Yeah.
So you're, like, guaranteed to be screwed there because 'cause you'll, like, leave at, like, 11 or midnight and get here at, like, 5 or 6. It's like, that is just not a good
Yeah,
scenario. You're
no.
just
We've done that a
automatically
couple times, that was not fun.
yeah.
We did it with the kids one time, but, yeah, I don't know. So what would the elites do then? Like, the guy like,
They'll typically
Sarah Hall,
go
did they go the week
they should go
before?
farther out. Yeah, if you're really looking to hammer and you say you wanna turn this, like, into a touristy sort of thing, then I would get there a week to 10 days out, and I would have the race be at the end. Or really, really close to the effort itself. Like, just kind of fly right in, get to the expo, kind of race the next day or the day or 2 later, and just get after it. And then do obviously the tourism stuff after, but that's what I would suggest. So if I was in a situation like Hall and I was looking to break an American record and get a master's record and all that, I probably would have gone a week to 10 days out.
Did she break the American masters record
Yeah,
or, like, a world
yeah,
masters record?
American masters, yeah.
Um, Now you mentioned at the expo, there was, like, races that you never heard of. Did you get a chance to see any of those? Is there any that you added to your list?
Nothing that comes to the top of mind, but I mean, the world is we are in a running boom right now. I mean, the world is just loaded with such cool races and so many cool events and, it's fun to visit other countries and explore their running culture and sort of the sensibility of their runs. And I think, yeah, there's just a ton of things to do.
So you
And I would say
mentioned
I would just really suggest people to kinda, like, challenge themselves and, think outside the box with some events and races and the other thing too is, like, obviously, when you travel overseas to race, there's a lot of there's the food component, there's the jet lag, and there's a lot of things to think about that to consider to make sure that you can race well, but the rewards are just so much better, like, you're just it's so cool to be a part of such a different event like that. The other thing that in terms of the race that I thought was really unique is they handed out straight up full water bottles at water stops, and they just like kind of crack the lid, but like you still have like a little lid and you have to take the lid off. And that was actually pretty cool for me because I would take a little bit of water and then I would just drain the whole thing on my head and then in my hat. And then that was just like such an easy way to stay like cool. Um, and it was also kind of fun to, like, then, like, shoot the bottle later and then, like, try to get
yeah,
it
that definitely has your name all over that.
so it was like it just was this fun little process because they had, like, these water stops, like, every 5K. So, like, just a K before the 5K marks, so, like, 5K, 10K, whatever, they had these water stops, and it was just such a cool little routine to be in.
That's nice to have like you said, a routine that you kinda
So they
can
don't
get
have that they
into.
don't use, like, Dixie cups or anything like that, it's just literally that.
Entire water bottles.
Yeah.
That's a lot of water
It
bottles,
is.
and I'm sure a lot of it gets wasted because most
Yeah.
people aren't gonna run
Oh,
holding on to
100%, like
that.
yeah.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so I mean, I know like up front, kinda definitely people were like tossing like full water bottles, but I know like where Cloud Crew was at, like people were like draining them. So
The cool thing about the running community, like you said, with the boom and all these unique races, is that it provides opportunities for people like me that don't love running to get motivated about running. While you were gone for the race, I was hanging out with my friend Jenna, and she's like, immediately we were talking about you and being at the race and all that. She's like, "Oh, I'm not a runner." It's like, I'm like, no, like you should do it. I'm like, and I was telling, and for somebody who hates running, I actually try to motivate people to run a lot. I'm like, no, like at least once, like do one half marathon at least once. And she's just like, no. And I was like, well, that's just part of it. Like, we just got to pick a cool one. Like, let's go to Spain and do a half marathon in Spain. She's like, okay, maybe behind that I can get. So it's cool to have these unique races, and it's
I know the
not.
Luxembourg race was sweet when we did it.
Oh, I love the fact it's nighttime. I love those nighttime
we ran
races.
a half in Luxembourg 2019, and it was so fun because part of the course they would hand out like beer because it's like German influenced, and then the other part of the course they were French influenced. They had like wine to hand out. It was literally hilarious. Like people were on part of the course partying with beer, on part of the course partying with wine. It was so funny. And like we ran through such cool little cobblestone roads and
Yes.
all that. Like it was
Great parts of the city, old parts of the
and
city
you
to
just see
see.
some cool things and yeah, you just like look up and you're like, "Oh my god."
So you had mentioned already to me, like right when you got to the city, like how outdoorsy they were, how active and just healthy and fit, and like everybody's out and about, and bike trails and running trails through the middle of the city and all of
Yeah.
that. So what else would you say that you notice is different about their like running culture in and of itself compared to ours here?
I would say I don't know. I mean, I think like um I think they are it's I think there's a little bit more of a component of there's not as much of a leisure runner there. I think if you are running or just a bit more serious, um, I think there's more of like a 5K fun run feel in the US that I think is pretty awesome and kind of gets people really engaged. And we also have a really vibrant ultra scene that's doing some cool stuff in terms of getting people into running. But there, it felt very like stuffy and like elitist in a way.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
But it makes sense if they're gonna have the fastest marathon, I guess, right there in their backyard.
yeah, and very like you go to the park and people are like really serious. Like people have like the gear and they're like really like fitted out, like they're looking pretty serious. So I feel like that was one thing I noticed, and part of that was skewed because there was just a ton of marathoners descended upon the city. But even walking around the city in general, you kind of get that sense. So just a pretty. I mean the Spanish people. I mean they're fit. They're pretty much everybody on the streets walking around was pretty fit.
Well, Latin culture in general is pretty, like, aesthetically driven
Yeah,
and, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, they're just vain. They're pretty vain, and I can
yeah,
say that because even though us Brazilians don't like being called Latin, I am Latin, so, like, the Brazilian culture is very vain, like, I mean,
yeah.
I remember my grandmother used to make fun of me because my grandma would, it's heels and makeup and blow drying her hair to, like, go to the grocery store for 15 minutes, and, I remember, like, I'm in sweatpants, and she just was, like, making fun of me, how I would never get married. I wouldn't keep my husband would cheat on me for sure when I got married if I looked like that
Oh my
every day,
gosh.
like, just very vain. And Spanish is very similar to
Yeah.
that. Anybody who's ever seen a Spanish soap opera can, even if you don't speak Spanish, you can pick up on that in, like, 5 seconds of watching a Spanish soap opera, so that would
Yeah.
make sense.
But I thoroughly enjoyed the sensibility of the city. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of share my experience of the event and, encourage anybody to kind of step outside the box and consider that as like a fun marathon to do. And especially if you're looking to PR and run fast and just tag along, just, you know, get in the flood of the high intensity effort and run a PR. It's bound to happen at that end of an event like that.
You'll have to go back and do it again so you can take me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, any other last points you want to touch on?
No, I think we covered it all.
Yeah, I think we did as well. So thanks again for another great episode. We're gonna have kind of up later this year, or we're almost to the end of the year here. I'm gonna do a kind of best of 2024. So we'll do an episode on that. I think we got an episode on back pain coming up. That'll be pretty big, and then we're into 2025 already. So stay tuned. We got a lot of fun topics coming up, and feel free to share this episode with anybody that you feel like is looking to run fast in the marathon and really taking it serious and training hard and this will be a good episode for them to listen to sort of expand their horizons of potential races they could and should run. All right, all the best.
Dr. Leo here. Be sure to check out my new book, Faster Without Fail, Your Guide to Overcoming Injuries and Running Faster Than Ever. It is now available on Amazon. You could read reviews on the Amazon. You can check out what other people have said about it. But basically, if you want to revolutionize your running form and better understand how to stay injury free within the sport, this is your guide. Feel free to reach out and let us know what you think of the book. I would love to hear your feedback. But again, please check it out on Amazon. Faster without fail. Appreciate it. Dr. Leo here. If you want to catch me in another setting, be sure to check out my YouTube page, Running Rehab, where you will find exercises on how to stay healthy with running, how to improve your running form, and a bunch of other tips and tricks on how to get over common injuries.